What's up guys, this is Miasin and today we will be going over the best cards that you can play going first in order to pretty much secure an insta win on the spot. I want to say pretty much for the most part, every single one of the cards that you're looking at on your screen are really good. Like even the worst ones are still relatively decent. They either have a lot of potential right now or at least in the future. And some of you might already be playing or at least considering almost like half of them. Your deck can at least afford to play them, or if you can side deck them. For the most part, these are side deck staples. But yeah, I will be ranking them in 5 different categories. So obviously the ones that are extremely broken, if you draw them you just win the game on the spot. The ones that are generically good but they're not as good as the best ones. The ones that are extremely good against like 1 or 2 kinds of decks but a little more niche, and then the ones that are probably a little too niche to be played, and the ones that are overall just not worth playing whatsoever. But yeah, what is really important with this video is my explanation on the positioning on each of these cards. And yeah, before we go any further, you already know the drill. Smash the like and subscribe button, and let's try to get this video to 1,000 likes. I know we can make it. And as always, watch the video until the end. Don't be a bitch. Okay, so first things first, we've got Share the Ride, which I really just don't think is worth playing because I'd rather play a card that prevents my opponent from searching rather than a card that, I guess, punishes him for doing so. Because if I'm on literally nothing, my opponent can just kill me, and then it doesn't matter if I draw like 10 cards, I'm still dead. And also, like, your opponent can still draw himself, and I don't know, it's just not really optimal. Mistaken Arrest is really weird because when you use it, obviously on your opponent's turn or on your own turn, you're going to be locked under like your next turn. So it's really awkward because it means that you're locking out your opponent for 1 turn, but then you're also locking yourself out. It's just really whack. You would have to play a deck that just doesn't lose to this card at all, like I don't know, Malice or Unchained or Labyrinth, something like that that just doesn't search. It's just not really worth playing. So I think it's anywhere between this and this section. It's still a good card, obviously, but I think it's a little too niche and can be somewhat played around, especially in Raziel. If they just make like Detonator Pass and then you do nothing, they are still gonna have the upper hand. Full Force Virus I really don't think is good because checking for defense is really not ideal in a format where people play a lot of hand traps. The hand traps have a tendency to have like 1800 defense, like Ash, Ogre, Mourner. These ones, they're going to survive from the full force, whereas another virus out there is going to be demolishing them and also taking care of a lot of engine cards. So I think full force is just not the right one, but I think the virus trap cards are still extremely powerful cards. Nightmare Corruptor Ibli is remarkable against Raziel. They don't have a lot of outs, so they would have to like crash it, but then again you can make the beat cop to prevent that from happening, or you can summon your monsters in defense, make sure that you got no link monsters on your field. What are they going to do? Like normal summon a monster, make Donner or Dagger for hire? I don't know, not a lot of people play that either. Considering how people are deck building right now, Ibli really demolishes them. Aura Filter is no longer worth playing because Ubel is being just flushed out of the format. It's just absolutely not worth playing because it has to compete with way too many hand traps and also plays way too many bricks in order to keep up with the sheer consistency of the top tier decks. Zombie World doesn't really counter much of anything. I think it's just a terrible card right now. Sure, it's decent against Cyber's decks, but it's also not great against them either. Triple Tactic Talent is anywhere between generic Blowout to Exodia depending on the context. I think going first is actually really good. Sometimes it can be Exodia, but it also depends on the quality of your hand. So it's not a card that really wins on its own. It's a card that allows you to win if you're already doing well. So I think I'm going to put it here, but it's a really, really good card going first. I think going second, it's way less good though. Crush Card Virus is very interesting. I think it's just not worth playing at the moment, unfortunately. However, there's been formats in the past where this card was actually worth playing. Like, for example, against Vanquish Soul, this card, I think, gets rid of everything except Dr. Madlove. If I recall correctly, I forgot, but a lot of high attack monsters in that deck. So yeah, that's what Crush Card Virus checks. You gotta tribute a monster, a dark monster with 1000 or less attack, which you can easily do in the Malice deck, for example. You can turn any monster into Lingerebo, and then you tribute it out away, but against the Raziel deck, it's not gonna destroy much of anything. I think it's only gonna destroy 2 monsters. The Thode, which has exactly 15, as well as the X. Everything else survives. The hand traps survive. That's really frustrating, unfortunately. So yeah, Crush Card is not really good. And also, if you're playing against like Kashtira, then obviously you destroy every single Kashtira monster, which is great. The issue is, even if you destroy like your opponent's Fiendsmith cards, like Crush Card also has the annoying drawback, which is now the errata, that makes it so that your opponent can destroy 3 cards, I believe, or 3 monsters from his deck. So you can destroy like a multiple engravers and then engraver revive back and then play from there. So you're really almost helping your opponent out sometimes. Non-fusion area is only good against fusion decks, so obviously this card's not really good in an Xyz or Link based format. There can only be one is only good against Malice. so it's not really ideal, unfortunately. Otherwise, yeah, it would be pretty nice. And also, there are some outs to this card in Malice. Like, for example, your opponent can normal summon a hand shop, and then make Salamangreat Elmirage, and then Lubellion or a Bestial banish, and then make an SP Low Knight banish that there can only be one, it should still be here. I don't even know why I put it in not worth. It's clearly worth playing if your deck can play it, but it's not the kind of card that I would main deck at all, because again, it doesn't really have too many applications. Macrocosmos is relatively okay-ish, like you can play it maybe in Malice, or you can play Dimensional Fissure or something like that. Yeah, both of these cards are good. I think Macrocosmos is like obviously more powerful. The issue is that it's a trap card, so you would have to like set it and then flip it on your opponent's turn. Dimensional Fissure, on the other hand, I might as well knock it out while we're here, if I can find it. I am blind. There we go. It's pretty much on the same level. Against the Raziel deck, it's less good, obviously, because the deck can easily out it in literally 2 seconds. And if you have like nothing else, then obviously you're kind of screwed. Dimensional Fissure, I think, is like slightly better, because with this card, you also shut down a bunch of hand traps. Like, you can't get Veiler, you can't get Ogred. But yeah, both of these cards are very interesting. I just don't think that they're necessarily great, because again, they're only good going first, and Malice is already very good going first, so you might as well play around the hand traps that your opponent has and stuff like that, instead of playing a floodgate that may or may not be good. But against like decks like Mermail, for example, these cards are gonna be great, so I would still definitely put a lot of respect on them. Imperial Iron Wall is a specific blowout against the Malice deck. This is a permanent Artifact Lancia. It absolutely wipes the floor with them, but I don't think it's really worth playing, because it's only truly good against that deck. However, depending on how popular the Malice deck becomes, then it could be really insane. So that's the reason why it's not going to be in the not worth section, just because it's at least good against the second best deck of the format, arguably, debatably. Summoning Curse, this card's a little complicated to use for no reason. Yeah, you gotta use it at the very end of your combo, and actually, to be fair, it's kind of good. It can get negated in like 2 seconds, though, against Raziel. They just send the Aggregator, and then they can negate this. Whereas at the very least, the Dimension Fissure and Macrocosmos, they're protected from Aggregator. Just for this reason alone, I think I'm actually going to upgrade them, to be fair. I think I disrespected them a little too much. But yeah, Summoning Curse, just not really the move. I think it's just, like I said, too easy to remove in like 2 seconds. Your opponent can just special summon twice, make like a Tornado Dragon, destroy this, and then only lose 1 card to it, so that's not really ideal. Kashtira Fenrir, or I guess the Kashtira engine in general. These cards are good. I mean, they're not really blowouts or anything, so I would not play them generically, especially if you're trying to side them in going first. But if you're playing like the Kashtira Fiendsmith deck, then obviously the Kashtira cards are like really good in your deck. But I would not side in 3 Fenrir generically going first just as a going first card. That's what I'm trying to say when I'm putting Fenrir this low. Different Dimension Ground is, I swear to God, low-key not as good as it was before. So again, it can't really be in the Exodia section, just because when you flip a card like this, it's good against a bunch of decks. Obviously, it's still generically good. It's still a blowout, but it's not the kind of card that if I draw it and if I resolve it, I know for a fact that I've won against literally every single deck out there. You can still lose with a card like Different Dimension Ground, because against, again, like decks like Raziel and stuff like that, they don't really have to send cards to the graveyard. They can still make a rank 4 and be safe. So that's the reason why pretty much every one of these cards, they fulfill a very similar role, and they're still in the exact same section. However, Different Dimension Ground, you can thrust it out. So that's the really good thing about it. So that's the reason why people play it. It's because of how easy to access it is, but it's not like an insta win card necessarily on its own. Stygian Dirge, is a very powerful card, but it's also not Exodia because it can get negated by the Aggregator. So in case you don't know what this card does, it decreases the level of each monster your opponent controls by 1. So against Raziel, they can never exceed summon except if they can negate this card. And also it makes it so that if your opponent doesn't immediately summon the X when he summons it later on, it's not going to surge, because now your opponent controls a non-level or rank 4 monster. And if your opponent starts immediately with the X Raziel, this card is Exodia. It literally, it's actually unfair, but unfortunately Aggregator is a thing. If Konami actually bans Aggregator, this card is going to be upgraded here, because it is quite literally the best floodgate against a rank 4 turbo deck that really has no other options when you think about it. Crossout Designator is in the Exodia tier, because if you're trying to full combo or whatever, and then your opponent hand traps, then this card, with the amount of hand traps that you can play in your deck, you can stop just about anything. Like, you can even stop the Molchemies if you really want to. You can stop Shifter if it bothers you. You can stop whatever. And you can also stop engine cards with Crossout. Like, this card is remarkable. And even going second, you can stop Dimensional Barrier, although I don't really recommend, because nothing guarantees that your opponent will necessarily play Dimensional Barrier. Deck Devastation Virus is also Exodia, and against a lot of decks too when you think about it, because this card checks for attack, but it's for low attack monsters. So essentially, you gotta tribute a dark monster with 2000 or more attack. Look at your opponent's hand. All monsters they control and all cards they draw until the third end of their turn, and destroy all of those monsters with 1500 or less attack. So against the Raziel deck, the only survivor is Ice Raziel. So whether they have Ice Raziel or Bonfire, everything else goes to the graveyard. Even if they go Desires, draw into like something, then it still dies. And against the Malice deck, I think they lose absolutely every single monster. No exception. The only survivors would be the Bestial monsters. Everything else dies. Every single hand trap, every single Malice monster. So yeah, they keep terraforming the Malice in the Underground and Gold Sarcophagus. These are the only, I guess, engine cards. And again, if they go like Allure of Darkness drawn to something, then it's not gonna matter. They will have to like send them to the grave. Although I will have to check if they gotta send their monster as soon as they draw it with Allure, or if they banish it and then it doesn't go to the graveyard. I'm really gonna have to double check on that. But yeah, this card is extremely good, and it's also very easy to resolve in the Raziel deck. You could just make like a Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, and that can be the tribute fodder for either Deck Devastation Virus or Eradicator Virus. So yeah, you can cover a lot of ground, honestly, with this card, as long as you can make just one rank 4 monster, which is a joke to make. Even if your opponent has 67 hand traps, it doesn't freaking matter. You can just resolve this, you win the game, and you win the game. Okay, Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. This card is a specific blowout. It's not really worth playing overall, but it's really good if you're playing like Raziel and you're up against like Despia. Like even going second, you can win the game because they Gimmick Puppet Nightmare Lock you, you set this, and then you flip it, and they can literally never attack you. They can never use the effect of anything, and then you can make a comeback on turn 4. It's honestly a great card. It's literally better than Dimensional Barrier against Despia, just because unlike D-Barrier, this card is also good, like I said, to draw at any moment during the game, and it's a permanent floodgate. They really can't out it at all. I don't even think there's like a single inherent out in the Despia deck. Solemn Strike is insanely good. I think it's at the very top of generic blowout, but it's not it's not like an Exodia card just because it's just a 1-for-1 for the majority of the time, but it's such a good one. It's honestly such a good card. I really like Solemn Strike. It's also pretty generic. Solemn Judgment is also up there. I don't know if it's like at the very bottom of Exodia because again, it just deals with one single card. It doesn't linger or anything, and it doesn't, you know, floodgate your opponent out of a full mechanic. So I think these cards are like fair, but in the fair category, they're like by far the best ones at doing their job. And also in a grind game, Solemn Strike is really good at dealing with your opponent's hand traps, and you can use this as a board breaker going second as well. It's just overall such a good card. And Solemn Judgment, I mean, it deals with like backroom move, board breakers, which is something that not a lot of cards can really do out there. Triple Tactic Thrust, this one maybe better than Talon going first sometimes, but it depends. It obviously depends also on the targets that you can play with the Thrust. Necro Valley is super niche. It's not a lot of decks that can even play the card, and even if you can, it's really not worth playing whatsoever. Anti-Spell Fragrance is not even like an Exodia card. I think it's very easy to out, like again, X-Raziel, Dumb the Aggregator. So like continuous trap cards, they're cool and all, but they don't always lead to victory. And Anti-Spell, maybe it deserves to be at the very bottom because it can also hurt you. Like you get a hand trap to death and then you're gonna be on top deck mode on turn 3, and then your own anti-spell screws you up, and it can be really frustrating sometimes. Like for this card to be a blowout, you also need the rest of your hand to be relatively good. Gravity Collapse is a very interesting one. It's kind of similar to the virus trap cards in a way where if you can just summon one monster, make this a card live, you kind of just win the game on the spot. You skip your opponent's full turn. Like your opponent can't summon anything for the rest of the turn at all, which is broken. And also, unlike D-Bear, this card is actually generically playable. When your opponent would summon a monster, so inherent summons only, send one face-up synchro monster you control to the grave as a cost, negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster, and your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end of this turn. Even normal summons, that's absolutely cracked. But you do have to control these synchro monsters, so it's not like super generic. It is a little more specific, and it is a little niche, unfortunately. However, there is one deck post Supreme Darkness that can really take advantage of this deck, and I'm not gonna spoil the goo right now, but I'm sure that some people in the comment section, they are well aware. So I think for now it's too niche, but it will eventually upgrade. Heat Wave is extremely good. It is very niche, but also it's more specific than you think. More generic than you think. I don't know if it should be up here, just because obviously going first, I mean, it's still such a good card. My issue with this card is that it's actually really bad when people are playing billions of hand traps, because what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna Heat Wave them, and then you're gonna pass, and then they're gonna pass, but they're also gonna have like a bunch of hand traps, and then it's back to you on turn 3, and then you still get a hand trapped. But it's really good against board breakers because now your opponent's board breakers are nullified, they're completely useless. And then on turn 3, so on your second turn, you can OTK, and your opponent's board breakers, again, they stay in the hand doing nothing. It's not like your opponent would have the defensive cards to prevent an OTK. So in 10 by Dragon, this card is still obviously broken because your opponent could have a bunch of hand traps. Sometimes they're not the correct ones. But in other decks, I think maybe it's a little less good. It's really good against like a Shifter and the Molchemies though, especially if your opponent shotguns on standby, which is incorrect. But if people play incorrectly, then Heatwave is the nuts. Forbidden Graveyards, or sorry, I guess they changed the name to like Silent Graveyard or something. This card is not worth playing at all. It's really bad. I just don't really have anything positive to say. Goes in match, not worth playing. It's not good against Malice because everything is dark. And also against Raziel, again, it just gets negated by the aggregator. And also it can be naturally outed, so it's not even like I have anything positive to say about it. Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, I mean, against Malice, it's fine. Against Ubel, it's good. It's probably better than I really give it credit for, honestly. White Howling, not worth playing. You gotta control a water monster, and you gotta banish a spell from your opponent's graveyard in order for this card to be live. No thank you. Eradicator Virus, I think, is... against Raziel, it's not Exodia because they actually don't play that many spell cards, shockingly enough. And against Malice, they actually play, I think, even less spell cards. I mean, it's still a super generic card. It's still so freaking broken. And again, Raziel is so good at abusing the Virus Trap cards. You really just need one freaking rank 4, and both of these cards are live. Literally, it's absolutely insane. And it's such a joke to achieve. Like, any of your starter gets you there. And you can even, like, play around the hand traps if you want to, not commit to duo drive, so that you don't lose to anything else. And then that way, you know for a fact that the Virus Trap cards are resolving. I just love it so much, man. Anyways, Called by the Grave. Yeah, this one clearly in the Exodia tier. Obviously, it's comparable to Crossout. It is very debatable which one is better. Depends, I guess. It depends on, like, if you're willing to play quote-unquote bricks for this card to be live, like, still keeping the Molchemies going first or Shifter going first, even when you don't really want to. I mean, yeah, obviously, you're not playing Shifter if you're trying to counter Shifter. Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Same issue with Eradicator, but it's even more niche because you gotta control a spellcaster and your opponent has to not control one. It's just a little whack. Mind Drain, yeah, this card is not worth playing at all. It's really bad against Raziel because everything is an inherent summon. You don't have to like declare that you're using the effect of X Raziel in your hand, otherwise it would be a little better. Same thing with Thode Raziel, by the way. Anyways, this is Soul Drain? Yeah, that was Mind Drain. Soul Drain. That's for Graveyard and Banished. That's actually kind of solid when you think about it. I mean, if it's also for the Banished, then it's actually kind of nuts against Malice. Oh, I actually never thought about that, huh? Monsters that are banished, as well as monsters in the graveyard, cannot activate their effects. This card wipes the floor with Malice. It's actually cracked. You can use this as a floodgate actually against both Mermail or I don't know, like freaking Malice or whatever, anything that has graveyard effects or in banished effects. I actually just even thought about this. Trap Trick is very good, of course, because I mean you can get pretty much anything with this card, but I mean it's not really a card on its own. It really just gets you to anything else, but it can get you to Eradicator, it can get you to Deck Dev, and it can get you to Dimensional Bearer. So in the Raziel deck, for example, I recommend doing 2 Trap Trick, 2 Virus, and then 2 Dimensional Bearer, just so that you can cover a lot of ground. Skill Drain. This is another extremely broken card. To be fair, that's more like on the Exodia section. Even though it can get countered by Aggregator, it's such a broken card. Harpy's Featherstorm is obviously an Exodia card. I mean, there's not a single deck that just doesn't lose to this card. The issue is, how easy is it to resolve this card? You can make Castel turn 1, and then you flip Featherstorm, and you just win. So again, D-Barrier into Featherstorm. That makes you insta-win the Raziel matchup literally on the spot. That is completely unfair. Yeah, there's a lot of insta-win cards now that I think of it. Okay, Rivalry of the Warlords. This is also very bad against Malice because everything is Cyberse. Against Raziel, they can live with only Pyro monsters because Detonator eventually gets them out of there, but if you can stuck them when they only have 1 Thunder monster, then it's actually not too bad. So I think it's actually better to play overall than the Goes in Match. I think Goes in Match is like really bad, but Rivalry is just overall a stronger card, at least right now. Dimensional Barrier, there's no requirement at all for it. It's a turn skip, and it's absolutely unfair. However, it can get countered by Crossout, because people will be playing Crossout for this card. Magic Deflector. I mean, it's actually not too bad, but it's not great either. I can live without a field spell. I can live without the Cross. I can live without plugin. I can live without the Malice in the Underground. So I think this card, it's not really its format right now, but it's a good card for sure. sure. So I'm gonna go back to this card in the future, and I'm definitely gonna upgrade it. Mass Change second, no, don't even think about it. And this card right here, Mischief of the Gnomes, is remarkable against Raziel. So freaking good. This card, just like Dimensional Barrier, it's gonna skip their turn, but it can do it twice because it also has a graveyard effect. So you can also mill it in, let's say if you're playing like Tier or Lightsworn or the Needlebug Nest trap decks. And obviously Beatrice is no longer a thing, unfortunately, or rather should I say fortunately. But this card, it can naturally be countered because if your opponent summons a monster from the deck or from the graveyard, then its level will still remain 4. Otherwise, it will become level 3. So it has its pros and cons against Stygian Dirge. It really is debatable which one is the better one. I think both of them are extremely good, but Mischief of the Gnomes, I guess, is safer because it cannot get negated by the aggregator that they dump with the X-Raziel. But yeah, that's it for this tier list real quick. I really hope that you guys were able to enjoy and learn a thing or two, because I was able to learn a bunch of things just making this tier list. I was not surprised. I was not expecting some of these cards to be this broken, like Soul Drain, for example, Featherstorm that can just be turned on by summoning Castel, and it's the only one too, and what a coincidence you're playing it anyways. How convenient. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and yeah, let me know how you feel about this tier list, like I said, in the comment section below. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.